If you've ever carried a tray into a room where everybody has more money than you'll make in a decade, you know the first rule they drill into you. Don't be seen, don't be heard. Your hands and feet, not a person. You glide in, you glide out. And if you do your job right, nobody remembers your face. I believed that rule. I lived by it. Until the night I opened my mouth and greeted a billionaire's Sicilian father in a dialect only my dead grandmother ever used with me, and the whole room froze like I just pulled a gun. I remember the weight of the tray first. 6 crystal glasses catching the chandeliers like prisms, 2 bottles of Barolo older than I am. My palms were slick, but my grip was solid. Years of double shifts at the hotel restaurant had taught my muscles what to do even when my brain was busy screaming. Amara, breathe. Elbows in, shoulders back, eyes down. Be small. That's what my manager had whispered to me 2 hours earlier in the staff locker room. You're on the main ballroom tonight. Vitale Group. Billionaires, politicians, Italians, old school. One misstep and they'll complain, corporate will breathe down my neck, and you'll be back on breakfast shift scrubbing omelet pans. Got it? Got it. I'd nodded. So hard my bun shifted. I got it, Miss Karen. Good, she had replied. And one more thing. Do not talk to the old man. Don't try to be friendly. Don't ask questions. He's particular. Particular. That was her nice white woman way of saying he might be racist, sexist, or both, and I don't want to deal with it. Just disappear. So I disappeared. I blended into the line of black-shirted servers at the edgy ballroom, listening to the clink of cutlery and the murmur of men who owned buildings where my mother cleaned offices at night. The air smelled like money and truffle oil. In the center of it all, at a long curved table, sat Luca Vitale, the billionaire CEO on all the magazine covers. Younger than I expected, beard sharp, navy suit tailored like it was sewn onto his body. To his right, a row of tanned men in suits who looked like they were born scowling. To his left, him, Don Salvatore Vitale, the patriarch. The reason every manager in this hotel had been walking around like someone stuck a cactus up their spine for a week. He didn't move much. He hadn't to. He just sat there in a charcoal 3-piece suit, silver hair slicked back, thick hands resting on a cane he probably didn't need. His eyes were the thing people whispered about. Like a shark, the banquet chef told us, cigarette dangling from his mouth by the back door. I saw him once look at a man across a room, and that man just shut up, like he felt his life being audited in real time. I tried not to look. I really did. But when you've grown up with an old lady muttering Sicilian at you over the stove, and you suddenly hear that same cadence rolling across a ballroom in downtown Chicago, your ears perk up whether you want to or not. My tray shifted in my hands. A glass rattled. I told myself it was coincidence. There are lots of dialects, lots of old Italian men in America. Just because he sounds like Nana doesn't mean... Amata, senti, one of the younger cousins said, laughing. Papa is doing the San Leone curse again. San Leone. My stomach dropped like an elevator. That's where Nana always whispered about when she was half asleep and thought I didn't hear. Back in San Leone, she'd begin, then catch herself, switch to, never mind, pass me the salt. I asked my mama about it once. She said, it's where she grew up, she told me shortly. Island off Italy. Don't romanticize it. It didn't love her back. Now, across the glimmering room, Don Salvatore was gesturing irritably with his glass. If they put pineapple on pizza one more time, I'll bring the curse of San Leone on this whole country. The men around him roared with laughter. The American executives smiled politely, not understanding a word. I almost dropped the tray altogether. Have you ever heard a sound so familiar in a place it doesn't belong that you feel like you're in 2 worlds at once? Part of me was still Amara the waitress, eyes down, calculating the steps from station to head table. Part of me was 7-year-old Amara on a plastic stool in our kitchen, Nana's calloused hands tapping my forehead. Repite, repeat, she'd say. Buongiorno, Don. Lumecore vi saluta. You greet elders like this, with respect, with your eyes low and your heart high. Why Don? I'd asked. Ain't that like a churchman? She smiled sadly. Where I come from, that's what you call a man who thinks he's God. In my earpiece, the banquet captain's voice crackled. Team Alpha, approach head table from the right. Wine service. Go. I stepped forward. Silver platters, crisp white napkins, the smell of roasted lamb and rosemary. I focused on the choreography we'd practice in the staff hallway. Right hand pour, left hand steady tray, one step back, pivot. The closer I got, the more the Sicilian rolled over me. Salvatore complaining about American coffee, Luca teasing him about missing the sea, names of people and streets I'd only ever heard in Rose's muttered stories. My heart was punching against my ribs by the time I reached the curve of the head table. The bodyguard on the end, Tommy, gave me a brief once-over. Neutral. I was just another uniform. Fine. I stopped at my mark, exhaled, and stepped up to Don Salvatore's place setting. He chose that exact moment to stand up. At first, I thought he was just stretching old knees. He moved slow, but when he straightened to his full height, there was nothing frail about him. The room's noise dimmed a notch. Conversations paused. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to lower their bows by instinct. He turned to step away from the table, and our paths intersected, me with my tray, him with his aura of untouchable. "Scusami," I muttered automatically, angling my body to let him pass without bumping him. I could feel his presence like static, like when you stand too close to an old TV. He hesitated, just for a second, long enough for my grandmother's training to shoulder past every no talking, no eye contact, no being anything but invisible warning my manager had given me. Later, I would replay that instant 100 times, thinking of all the ways I could have handled it differently. Tonight, muscle memory won. My knees bent on their own. Not a full curtsy, nothing dramatic, just a slight dip, my shoulders rounding forward, chin lowering, like I'd done at Rose's bedside 1,000 times. My tongue moved before my brain registered what it was doing. Benvenuto, Don. Lumecore vi si china d'onore. Welcome, Don. My heart bows with honor for you. It came out in Rose's dialect, not the clean Italian my high school teacher had corrected me into, the rough, poetic, street and kitchen Sicilian my grandmother had poured into my ears along with folk remedies and half-remembered prayers. The effect was instant. Every conversation in the immediate vicinity died. Forks paused halfway to their mouths, glasses halted in midair. The sound of the string quartet stuttered. The violinist scraped a sour note, then stopped completely. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Did that black girl just... I saw it in the Americans' eyes, the confusion. They didn't know what I said, but they recognized the fear rolling off the Italians. Papa looked down at me sharply. Up close, his eyes were even sharper, a pale gray that had probably once been startling, now faded but still cutting. You could see the young man he'd been under the wrinkles. For a second, he went wide. Not anger, shock. He switched to dialect automatically, the words leaving his mouth like they'd been waiting decades for a reason to come out. "Chi t'ha l'imparo a parlare a così?" he demanded. "Who taught you to speak like that?" I froze, the tray trembling in my hands. My brain kicked in now, screaming, "You idiot! You were told not to talk, not to look at him, not to be anything but invisible." Manager Karen's face flashed in my mind, already writing my termination letter. Mi scusassi," I stammered, dropping back into English because my heart had rocketed into my throat. "No movie teaches that," he barked in English, his accent thick enough to chew. His attention flicked to his right. "Luca." His son leaned in. "Papa?" "Did you hear her?" he hissed in Sicilian now that his English had given out. "The way she said it, that's San Leone, that's Mama's kitchen. Only one family spoke like that, He cut himself off, his eyes snapping back to me. "Your name," he ordered. I swallowed. "Amara, sir." "Your family. Your nonna." Nonna. The word hit like a stone dropped in a still pond. I should have lied. That's what any smart girl trying to keep her job would have done. Make up some generic American last name, pretend she'd learned the words in a YouTube video, back away slowly. But my grandmother's face swum up in front of me, lined and stubborn. "Don't you let them tell you you don't come from anywhere," she'd muttered the night before she died, gripping my hand so hard her nails left half-moon marks. "Rosa," I whispered before I could stop myself. My grandmother's name was Rosa, Rosa Conti. The reaction was physical. Salvatore's fingers whitened around the handle of his cane. A sound escaped from him. Not quite a word, not quite a gasp. Luca, who'd been half distracted watching a text flash on his phone, snapped his head up. "What did she say?" he asked in English. "She said Conti," one of the cousins murmured, eyes darting between us. "Papa's sister?" "Shut up," another hissed, elbowing him. Salvatore took a shaky step closer. For a second, I thought he was going to grab me. The bodyguard behind him shifted, hand going instinctively toward his jacket. Luca put a restraining hand on his father's arm. "Papà, calmati," he murmured. "Calm down." "Non mi posso calmare," the old man snapped. "Not when I—" He switched back to English, wheezing slightly. "You from here?" he demanded, vaguely waving a hand at the room. "Chicago, sir," I said, voice shaking. "South Side." "Your nonna," he insisted. "She from where? Who was her father? Tell me." Have you ever had someone who should be a stranger interrogate you with the urgency of a man who thinks you're holding the answer to the biggest regret of his life? The tray felt like 100 pounds now. My mouth was dry. Part of me wanted to clam up, apologize, run to the kitchen, and let security exit me back the back. The other part, the one that had sat at Rosa's feet while she stirred pots and told little slivers of truth between big silences, recognized something in that old man's desperation. He wasn't just annoyed I'd spoken. He was haunted by the same place my grandmother was haunted by. I licked my lips. She said she was from a village near Agrigento, by the sea. She called it San Leone. A sound ripped out of him, this time unmistakably a sob. The bodyguard's eyes went wide. Luca's jaw dropped. The quartet in the corner exchanged glances like they realized they were playing background music to a ghost story. Salvatore sank back into his chair as if his bones had suddenly remembered their age. "No," he muttered in dialect. "It cannot be. After all these years." He looked up at me again, and for the first time, there was no shark in his gaze. Just an old man who'd lost something a long time ago and never expected to see a trace of it again. "Everyone out," he said abruptly. "Papa," Lucas started. "Not you. Him and you. Everyone else go. Eat, talk. I don't care." He waved a dismissive hand at the table. Men in suits exchanged uncertain looks, but when the Don speaks, people listen. Chairs scraped, conversations restarted in low tones. The spell of silence shifted to a low buzz, but every eye kept flicking our way as they pretended not to look. The banquet captain caught my gaze from across the room, eyes wide with panic, mouthing, "What did you do?" I had no idea how to answer that. All I knew was that the rule of don't be seen, don't be heard was officially broken. Have you ever accidentally tripped a wire in someone else's past and felt your own life rearranging itself in real time? Luca stepped between us, regaining that CEO posture. "Miss Amara, was it?" he asked smoothly. "My father would like to speak to you privately after dinner. Please don't leave the premises." His voice was polite. His eyes were not. They said very clearly, "If you run, we will find you." I nodded, throat too tight to speak. "Yes, sir." "Good," he said, smile snapping back on as he turned to clink his glass, calling the room to attention. "Gentlemen, a toast to my father, who has crossed an ocean to be with us tonight." The evening resumed its script. Speeches, toasts, deals being hinted at, waiters moving like shadows. But from that point on, the temperature in the room felt different for me. Every time I approached the head table, I could feel Salvatore's gaze on me, heavy and measuring. Every time I retreated to the kitchen, the other servers swarmed me. "Girl, what did you say? I never seen a white man cry like that. You about to be fired or rich, one of the two." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. My grandmother's words still sat on it, heavy. In my mind, I could see her beating a spoon against a pot, singing half in English, half in dialect. "Questo core mio es ingranato, but it still beats, child. This heart of mine is cracked, but it still beats." Maybe that's what happened in that old man's chest when he heard me. Something cracked. Something long dead twitched. I was terrified. And underneath the terror, like a pilot light under a cold stove, something else flickered. A dangerous little spark of curiosity. Have you ever spent your whole life being told to make yourself small, then watched your smallest, most hidden piece of yourself, your accent, your greeting, your grandmother's dialect, explode into a room full of power and realize with horror and wonder that you might be tied to that power in ways you never prepared for? When the last plate was cleared and the last guest drifted out of the banquet hall, my manager found me by the bus trays. "The Vitali son asked for you," she said, voice high and tight. "Don't say anything, don't admit anything, just go see what they want." She squeezed my arm, the closest she'd ever come to a hug. "And whatever happens," she whispered, "remember I had nothing to do with this." I almost laughed, as if anyone in that family would care enough about hotel management drama to blame me for my existence. "Yes, ma'am," I said. I smoothed my shirt, checked my bun in the stainless steel reflection, and walked toward the side room where Luca Vitale and his father were waiting to ask me questions about a place I'd never been, but had lived in my blood my whole life. I thought I was going to lose my job that night. Instead, I was about to find out my grandmother had left me more than recipes and lullabies. She'd left me a name. If you'd seen me in that side room hallway, black shirt, apron, name tag that said Amara in block letters, you'd have thought I was born to be invisible in spaces like that. To be the one who pours, wipes, clears, the one whose good job is a nod, not a name. You would never have guessed my first lullabies were in Sicilian. Have you ever carried a piece of culture in your mouth that doesn't match the skin you're in and been told your whole life to tuck it away because it makes people stare? Most people in my neighborhood assumed my grandma was from down south. The way she said baby and bless you fit in with the other church ladies. It was the other words that threw her off. "Ama, vieni cá," she'd call from the kitchen. "Come here, girl. The polenta's gonna stick if you don't stir it." Kids on the block would nudge each other. "Why your grandma sound like Tony Soprano?" they'd tease. "You half Italian or something?" I'd shrug, embarrassed. I'd say she's just old. She talk funny. And then later, at home, I'd mimic them to my mom. "Why does she have to be so weird, Ma? Why can't she just talk like normal black grandmas?" My mother, Denise, would give me that look, the one that could peel paint. "Watch your mouth," she'd say, flicking dishwater at me. "Your grandma's English is her third language. Show some respect." "Third?" I'd ask, confused. "English, Gullah, Sicilian," she'd list off, counting on her fingers. "Woman's lived enough lives for 4 people. You'd be lucky to live half as much." That was the end of that conversation. At least the part she was willing to have. Grandma Rosa herself deflected questions with even less information. "Non ti fare I fatti miei," she'd mutter. "Mind your business," then push a plate of whatever she was cooking into my hands. Tortellini one night, red beans and rice the next. Her food was the only explanation anyone ever got for how a dark-skinned black woman from Charleston ended up sounding like she'd stepped out of a fishing village on some Italian island. It wasn't until I was 11 that I started putting the pieces together. One rainy Saturday, I was stuck in the apartment, bored out of my mind. Mom was at work, doing the weekend overnight at the nursing home. I'd finished my homework, read all the library books I'd checked out, and the TV wasn't picking up anything but static and church infomercials. I wandered into Nana's room looking for something to do. Her bedroom was a time capsule. Lace curtains, a dresser older than anyone in the house. On top of it, a wooden jewelry box that played a tinny music box tune when you cranked it. Inside, old earrings, a rosary, a few faded photographs. I'd seen the picture before. Young Rosa in a knee-length skirt and blouse, standing on a pier next to a tall black man in an army uniform. Behind them, a ship loomed, all steel and rivets. She looked hopeful. Not the tired, sharp-eyed woman I knew. Her hair was tucked under a scarf. A little cross on a chain gleamed at her neck. The caption on the back, in looping handwriting, read, Rosa Conti and James, Naples, 49. Naples? Italy? Conti? Not a name from any of our family reunions in South Carolina. Put that back, Rosa's voice rasped from the doorway, making me jump. I know what she was just, she said, walking slowly to the dresser. Just nosy, like your mama. But there was no real heat in it. She picked up the photo, thumb brushing over her own face. For a second, I saw something soften. Longing, regret. Then she snapped the feeling shut, like the jewelry box. Who is he? I asked. And is that in Italy? She sighed. My husband, she said. Your mama's daddy. And yes, before this place. She waved a hand vaguely, meaning America. Before our little patch of North Side Chicago. You married a soldier? I breathed. My image of my grandma had never included anything as romantic as that. I married a fool with pretty eyes and promises, she said. That's what most of us do at some point. I stared. So you lived in Italy? Not long, she said. Not like some dream vacation. War over, boy didn't want to be there anymore. I was tired of my father's face. America sounded prettier than staying. Your father? I asked. He was Italian? She hesitated. Her hands went very still. He was Sicilian, she corrected. Difference. He was also an ass. Then, as if the words themselves had cracked something open she didn't want to deal with, she changed the subject. Go get the pot from the stove before the sauce burns, and don't go through my drawers without asking. I'll pop you. Have you ever watched an elder bat your curiosity away like a fly and known deep down that the story they were hiding from still mattered to who you are? After that, I paid more attention. I listened when she cursed at the TV in dialect. Maledetto when a politician lied. Testa di monizza when a soap opera villain did something particularly stupid. I noticed the way she flinched when my mother joked about Italian men. Didn't you have enough of them, Ma? Denise would say, rolling her eyes when Nana adamantly refused to buy jarred marinara. Couldn't you even leave that over there in Sicily? That was the problem, Rosa would shoot back. They didn't let me take none of what mattered, just the tongue and the damage. Denise would click her tongue, shut the cabinet a little harder than necessary. We are not going down that road, she'd mutter. That road. Sicily. The place I came from and didn't. At school, none of that existed. I was just the quiet black girl who sat in the back, did her work, didn't raise her hand unless she was sure she had the answer. People mispronounced my name, Amara, Amora, and I'd correct them once or twice, then gave up. I didn't speak Italian, not officially. I couldn't conjugate verbs in the present perfect or explain the difference between sapere and conoscere, but my mouth knew the shape of beda mia and stemu and filia the way other kids knew ain't. Grandma's Sicilian dialect wasn't the pretty Italian on TV, it was street Sicilian, thick as gumbo. When I'd slip and say something in it around my friends, they'd giggle. You sound like the Godfather, they'd say. Say, forget about it again. I learned quickly my grandma's words were for home. Outside, I kept my mouth tight and my sentences standard. It wasn't that I was ashamed of being black with a Sicilian grandma. I was ashamed of always feeling like I wasn't black enough or Italian enough to claim either fully. On one side, kids at school making olive jokes, asking if I could make pasta from scratch like it was a parlor trick. On the other, my mother's resentment whenever I got too fascinated with Nana's stories. "You don't need to be dreaming about an island that didn't claim us," she'd say. "This is where you live. This is who shows up for you. Remember that." So I did. I learned to tuck my curiosity away behind work, behind being helpful, behind making as little noise as possible. By the time I was 18, the Sicilian dialect was something I only used in two contexts, when Nana was too tired to switch to English, and when I whispered old blessings under my breath before exams or job interviews. "San Giuseppe guardami," she'd taught me. "Saint Joseph, watch over me." I didn't believe in much, but I believed in her, so I said it. Then she died. It happened fast. Stroke on a Tuesday, gone by Thursday. One minute, she was slapping my hand away from the pot like, "You're gonna burn the garlic." The next, she was lying in a hospital bed, half her face slack. Her voice, my lifeline to a whole other side of me, came out garbled. The night before she passed, I sat by her bed, holding a hand that had lost its strength, but not its stubbornness. "Non ti scantari," she mumbled. "Don't be scared." "I am scared," I admitted. I don't know how to do this without you." She squeezed my hand, hard for someone whose body had given up so much. "You know more than you think," she said. "You know my words. That is something. That is inheritance." "Inheritance?" I echoed. "I can't pay rent with Sicilian cuss words, Nana." She snorted a laugh that turned into a cough. "Maybe not," she rasped. "But when the world tells you you're from nowhere, you tell it that you from people who survived. African and Sicilian and Southern and Yankee and all the rest. You say, 'I know the words of my dead, and that means I ain't drifting.'" She looked at me, really looked at me. "Promise me you don't let nobody make you feel like you got no right to be in any room. You hear? Promise." I promised. But promises made in hospital rooms under fluorescent lights have a way of fading when the fluorescent lights at the office hit you just as harshly. After her funeral, small Baptist church, more greens than lasagna at the repast, my life shrank down to survival. College had to wait. Mom couldn't hold the rent and the bills alone. I slipped into the grind that swallows so many of us. Front desk job at a dentist's office by day, waitress at a mid-range restaurant by night. When the hotel opened, offering slightly better tips and slightly worse hours, I jumped. Fancy hotel meant fancy payers. Fancy payers meant maybe, just maybe, I could climb out. You'd think working at a 5-star hotel would make me feel closer to Nana's European side. Wrong. It made me feel like I was always wearing a costume. Smile, make eye contact but not too much, speak clearly but not too informally, code switch on top of code switch. The only time Sicilian touched my tongue anymore was late at night, in the tiny studio I could barely afford. I'd pour cheap red wine into a chipped mug, stand by the window and murmur old phrases just to hear something of her in my own voice. "Buonanotte, Rosa. Buonanotte, nonni I never met." It was more habit than faith. A string I didn't know I'd need until much later. At work, my boss loved me for all the reasons people like her always do. I showed up early, stayed late without complaining, never flirted with guests, never disappeared for smoke breaks. She especially loved that I was shy. "You don't cause drama," she'd say approvingly. What she meant was, you don't make white people uncomfortable. It was easy to disappear into that role. Easier than being the loud, messy, complicated person I knew I could be with the right people. Serving rich folks became routine. I got used to a certain kind of rudeness, a certain kind of obliviousness, people snapping fingers, people calling me sweetheart or girl without ever glancing at my name tag. I also got used to the occasional moment of quiet rebellion, pocketing the extra breadsticks, rolling my eyes in the walk-in freezer, sharing a knowing look with the other black and brown staff when some executive said something cringe. But I never, ever broke the main rule. Do not bring your whole self into the dining room. That self, black, poor, half-educated, half Sicilian, fully opinionated, was for outside. Inside, you were, yes, sir, right away, ma'am, and silence. So when the memo about the Vitali event went out, I knew why they picked me for the top tier. I was safe, invisible, competent, the perfect background extra for a billionaire's photo op. The irony is that's exactly why I was the one in the right place at the wrong time with the right words. I didn't go into that ballroom thinking, tonight I will introduce myself to my great uncle from Sicily and blow up a multi-billion-dollar family's narrative. I went in thinking, don't spill anything, don't trip, don't let the accent slip. And then I heard Salvatore Vitale grumble in San Leone in my grandma's dialect and watched my two worlds collide like trains on the same track. If Nana had been alive, she would have yelled at me for what I did next. "Girl, you trying to get fired?" she'd say. "Keep your head down in houses that ain't your own." But she also might have nodded later, hearing how it played out. "Of course you greeted him properly," she'd say. "You're my blood." I didn't know yet that his blood and hers were the same. All I knew as I stood outside that side room while the last of the guests filtered out and staff scraped plates in the distance was that my manager was one door over, biting her nails, that security glowered from the corner like human exclamation points, and that Luca Vitale himself had told me, "Do not leave." I could have clocked out, slipped out the service entrance, pretended I had no idea they were looking for me. But that would have meant spending the rest of my life wondering why a powerful old man from an island my grandma never quite left had looked at me like a ghost come back to haunt him. And Rosa didn't raise a runner. "Amara," Karen hissed, poking her head out from the side room. "They're ready for you." My heart thudded so hard I thought she could see it through my shirt. "If I get fired, can I at least still use you as a reference?" Her laugh was short, strained. "Girl, if you get fired and it's their fault, I'll write you the nicest reference letter this city's ever seen. Now go, and for the love of God, don't say anything weird." Too late for that, I thought. Have you ever stood in front of a door knowing there's a version of your life on the other side where everything turns upside down and realized you're more afraid of never knowing than you are of the fall? I wiped my palms on my apron, straightened my shoulders, and stepped through the door. The side room they led me into was smaller than the ballroom, but still bigger than my whole apartment. Mahogany paneling, a long, polished table, shelves lined with leather-bound books I doubted anyone had read in the last decade. It smelled like old money and lemon polish. Luca stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a tumbler of something amber he wasn't really drinking. The bodyguard who'd hovered behind his father all night, Tony, I had learned, stationed himself by the door like human punctuation. You're not leaving without an explanation. At the head of the table sat Don Salvatore. Kane leaned against his chair, a half-empty espresso cup in front of him. My manager hovered in the doorway like she hoped the floor would swallow her. "She's here," she said unnecessarily. "Thank you," Luca replied, that CEO smoothness back in place. Karen shot me a look that said, "I tried," and backed out, closing the door. The click sounded final. Have you ever suddenly become the only person in a room without a tailored suit and realized your uniform had turned into a spotlight instead of camouflage? I stood where I was, hands clasped in front of me like we'd been trained in training, submissive but not groveling. My heart hammered in my ears. Every bit of me wanted to fidget. I locked my knees instead. "Sit," Salvatore said, switching to English for my benefit. He gestured to the chair opposite him. His voice didn't have the bark from earlier. It was rough, like gravel rolled in a palm. "I'm fine standing, sir," I said automatically. "Sit," he repeated, and there was no room in that syllable for negotiation. I glanced at Luca. His eyes were hard to read, some mix of irritation, curiosity, and something else I couldn't place. He gave the tiniest of nods. I sat. The chair felt too soft, like it might swallow me whole. There was a moment of silence where nobody seemed to know who should talk first. Then Salvatore leaned forward, elbows on the table. Up close, I could see age spots on his skin, the way his hands trembled just a little when he wasn't clenching them. In Italian, he said, almost to himself, people learn from books, from school, but what you said was not Italian. That was home. He lapsed back into dialect without even noticing. Home from a long time ago. I swallowed. My grandmother, I managed. She taught me. Your grandmother's name, he said. It wasn't a question. It was an order. Rosa, I said. Rosa Conti. She came here, a long time ago, before I was born. His face changed. I'd seen a lot of expressions in that hotel. Sleazy smiles, polite boredom, outright contempt. But I had never seen a man as powerful as this look like a frightened boy. Conti, he repeated, the word barely a breath. His eyes squeezed shut like he was bracing for a punch. Rosa Conti. He opened them again and fixed them on me. How old are you? He asked. I'm 26, I said. He did the math in his head. I could see him adding years like beads. Too young to be mine, he muttered. Too young to be her. His gaze sharpened. Your mother's name? He asked. Denise, I said. Denise Johnson. She took my granddad's name. He was a... I stopped myself. I didn't owe these people my entire family tree. A soldier, he finished for me, surprising me. It wasn't a question either. My heart stuttered. Yes, I said slowly. How did you... He sat back, ran his hand over his face. For the first time since I'd seen him that evening, he looked tired in a way that power couldn't paper over. You know nothing, he said in dialect, half to himself. Of course you know nothing. We made sure of that. Papa, Luca's voice cut through, impatient. Can we switch to English, please? For my sake, I'd like to understand this conversation too. Salvatore gave him a look that said 1,000 untranslatable things about sons and languages and who bothered to learn what mattered. Then he nodded. Fine, he said. His accent thickened over the vowels, but the words were clear enough. He pinned me with his gaze. What did she tell you, your nonna, about Sicily? Have you ever been asked to measure the secret someone you love took to their grave and decide on the spot how much to betray and how much to protect? I licked my lips, considering. Not much, I admitted. She'd talk about the sea sometimes, about lemon trees and old women fighting over fish at the market. She taught me how to cook certain things, but every time I asked why she left, she'd shut it down. My mom said... I stopped. Saying too much about Denise's bitterness felt like disloyalty layered on top of disloyalty. Your mother said what? Salvatore pressed. My mother said the island didn't love her back, she said quietly, and that a man did her wrong there. That's all. His jaw tightened. The man was me, he said. The room tilted, not in a literal falling over way, more like someone had grabbed my picture of the world and turned it sideways. I stared. What? Rosa Conti was my sister, he said. My little sister. We grew up in San Leone, same house, same parents, same curse. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. She was wild, he went on, switching back to dialect for a sentence before dragging it into English. Too much heart, too much mouth. She wanted more than that village could offer, more than my father thought our name should be allowed to reach for. I could hear Rosa's voice suddenly, scolding me for wanting to stay out late. Your name is all you got in this world, she'd say, shaking a spoon. Don't give nobody a reason to spit when they say it. She'd never mentioned that the name had once belonged to a Sicilian man, now sitting across from me. Then came the Americans, he said, gaze drifting to some middle distance only he could see. Soldiers in big boots with chocolate and cigarettes and mouths full of promises. One of them, a black man from Georgia, I think, looked at Rosa like she was a miracle. She looked back to the same. He shrugged, but his eyes were sharp with old pain. You know how that story goes. He didn't have to explain it to me. I'd read enough, seen enough. Brown girl, white Catholic village, black foreign soldier. Recipe for scandal. Then, our father forbade it. He said she was shaming us, that no sister of his would marry that. The way he said that made my stomach flip. The disgust, the racism, the internalized nonsense I'd heard echoes of in black families talking about good hair and don't get too dark. "And you?" I asked before I could stop myself. He rubbed his thumb over the cane's handle. "I said nothing," he admitted. "That was my sin." He looked at me then, eyes sharp with suddenly. "I was coward," he said. "I loved my sister, but I loved my father's approval more. So when he sent her away, put her on a boat with that man, told her never to come back, I let it happen. I told myself I was protecting her from worse, that she would have a better life in America. I didn't stop him. I didn't follow her." He swallowed. "When I grew older, when men started listening to me instead of him, I tried to find her. A few letters came, then they stopped. I hired someone to look in New York, in New Orleans, in Chicago. Nothing. And then life pulled me forward. Business, marriage, children, money, the mafia, if we're being honest." The word hung in the air like smoke. Luca flinched slightly. "Papa," he warned. "Please," he said, "you think the FBI doesn't already have a file with my name on it? I'm too old to pretend I have clean hands." He turned back to me. "I told myself maybe it was better this way," he said softly. "Better she start new. Better her children not know the weight of our name." He chuckled bitterly. "Then you open your mouth in my son's fancy hotel and greet me like my grandmother did. And when I ask her name, she says Rosa Conti." He let out a shaky laugh. "If that's not God dragging my sins into the light, I don't know what is." Luca had gone pale. "You're saying she's family?" he asked, voice somewhere between disbelief and something like hope. "Blood," Salvatore said simply. "Long lost, but blood." He switched back to dialect for a moment, more out of habit than secret. "Tisidia," he asked me. "Does that bother you?" Did it bother me? Yes, and no, and yes again. I thought about Rosa hissing under her breath about that island, refusing to answer my questions about why she never called, never wrote, never visited. I thought about my mama, who grew up without a father in a country that hated both halves of her existence in different and sometimes overlapping ways. I thought about myself, whose whole sense of where I'm from had been wrapped in silence and half-remembered recipes. Have you ever had the thing you always secretly wanted, proof that you came from somewhere, show up in a form that forced you to reckon with all the ways that somewhere had hurt the people you love? I didn't have to answer right then. Lucas seemed to sense that. "We won't overwhelm you, but we would like to explore this. My father is not a sentimental man. If he says you sound like his sister, we'd be fools not to look." Salvatore snorted. "All of you been fools about family," he muttered. "Look what it took to get you to listen." He fixed me with that sharp gaze again. "Rosa used to say, 'La lingua è sangue.' Language is blood," he said. "Tonight, your blood spoke. I can't ignore that. Not again." Language is blood. I thought about all the nights I'd whispered Sicilian prayers over bills and job applications, about the way I'd struggled not to say buongiorno to regulars at the diner because it made them look at me funny, about the way I'd smiled and nodded when people told me I talked white because they heard the careful. Maybe Rosa had been right. Maybe my tongue had been carrying my lineage all along, even when the people responsible for it pretended I didn't exist. Now, with one slip of that tongue in a fancy dining room, I'd forced the man who'd helped erase her to say her name again. Rosa Conti. Have you ever felt your ancestors lean in so close you could almost hear them whisper, "Now, don't waste this"? I was still just a waitress in a wrinkled black shirt, sitting in a room where everyone else had more zeros and more stories under their belt than me. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel entirely like I was there by accident. I felt like somehow I was finally exactly where a stubborn Sicilian grandmother I'd never met, and a stubborn Sicilian grandmother I'd loved with my whole heart, had always hoped I'd end up. In front of the man who owed us both an apology. I walked out of that side room feeling like my shoes didn't fit anymore. The other servers looked at me like I'd just returned from a war zone. In a way, I had. "You still got a job?" one of them whispered as I slipped back into the service area to hang up my apron. "For now," I said. My voice sounded hoarse even to me. Karen said I can go home. She had, with that brittle smile managers get when they're trying to act like everything's under control. "Clock out, Amara. Take tomorrow off. HR will be in touch." Be in touch. 2 words that can mean promotion or pink slip. Given the way this evening had gone, I didn't have the energy to guess which. Have you ever had your entire sense of security rocked in one night and still remember to put your bus card back in your purse so you can get home? The next morning, I told my mother everything. I didn't plan to. I went over to her apartment on autopilot, same as every Sunday morning, same sagging couch, same faded curtains, same smell of coffee and whatever cleaning product she managed to snag on sale. She was in her robe, hair in a headscarf, watching some pastor on TV shout about blessings. When she saw my face, she muted him mid-hallelujah. "What happened?" she demanded. "You look like somebody told you Jesus got laid off." I tried to give her the sanitized version. There was this event at the hotel. Italian Billionaires, a big deal. Nana's Dialect came out. Her eyebrows shut up. "You mean you started fussing at people in Sicilian?" "Not fussing," I said. "I greeted someone. The CEO's father. He's from San Leone. He recognized what I said. He recognized Nana's name." I expected her to laugh it off, to say, "Girl, please, you think there's only one Rosa in Sicily?" Instead, she went very still. The remote clenched in her hand. "You said what?" she asked quietly. "He said she was his sister," I said, the words feeling unreal even as I said them. "He said he was the one who let their father send her away, that he tried to find her." Her mouth tightened. "Liar," she spat before I could finish. I blinked. "Ma?" "He had 50 years to find her," she snapped, sitting forward. 50 years while she was breaking her back in other people's houses, raising me alone, crying over that stupid map she kept in her drawer. You think some rich old white man suddenly growing a conscience makes him my grandfather? "He's not white," I said automatically. "He's Sicilian." Same difference when it came to her, she shot back. They all said the same words. "No color in our family. No black babies at our table." She told me. You think she just made that up? "I don't," I said quickly. "I believe her, and I believe he was a coward. He said that himself. But I hesitated. I also think maybe it matters that he knows that somebody on that side of the ocean finally said her name with something other than shame." "What matters," my mother said, jabbing a finger toward me, "is that we survived without them, without their name, without their money, without their so-called honor. You think I'd be where I am if I'd waited for some Sicilian coward to come rescue me?" She let out a harsh laugh. "Now he's over there hugging on you, calling you figlia, trying to die a saint? No, baby, don't let that man buy your forgiveness with gifts." I hadn't mentioned gifts yet, but of course she assumed. That's how people like us survive. We learn to read subtext. If a powerful man suddenly calls you family late in life, there's always something transactional in it. He hasn't offered me anything, yet. He just wants to talk, to know what happened to her, to you, to me. He wants to feel better, she corrected. He wants to sit in his nice house and tell himself, "I made it right with my black kin before I died." Whether you talking back to him is your business, but don't you dare let him act like his regret erases what my mama went through. Her voice broke on mama. I saw in that instant the little girl she'd been, watching her own mother get letters returned, hearing snatches of arguments in Sicilian and English, absorbing the message that she was better off pretending half her lineage didn't exist. I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm trying to add pages. I spent my whole life feeling like Nana's stories were random. Now I know where they fit. I want to see it, just once. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, some of the heat had bled away, replaced with exhaustion. "If you go," she said, "you go for you. Not for me, not for him. And you remember, a last name don't mean much if they still see you as a maid in their nice rooms." I already know how that feels, than living it. Have you ever sought your mother's blessing knowing you probably wouldn't get it and had to go anyway because another part of you, deeper and quieter, is just as important to listen to? I went back to work the next day, half convinced I'd find a termination letter waiting. Instead, HR called me in, closed the door, and slid a form across the table. "We've received a very unique request," the HR rep said carefully. "The Vital Group would like to engage you for a private cultural consultancy. On your off hours, outside your hotel role, they were very clear this would not affect your employment status here one way or another. It's between you and them. But given the overlap, we need to make sure there are no conflicts of interest." I stared. "A what?" His exact words were, "My father would like to speak with Miss Amara about our family history. We will, of course, compensate her for her time." She quoted, a wry smile tugging at her mouth. "Girl, what did you say to that man?" "Nothing," I said weakly. I greeted him in Sicilian." Her eyebrows shot up. "Like Ciao Bella?" "More like something his mama would have said." Shauna sat back. "Well," she said, "you always were full of surprises." She dropped the corporate tone. "Look, off the record, this could be big for you. Money, connections, hell, a DNA test that answers questions Nana took to the grave. But it could also be messy, rich people messy, mafia-adjacent messy." She gave me a pointed look. "Think about what you want out of this. Set boundaries. Don't let them treat you like a charity project or a long-lost pet." Have you ever had another Black woman in a position of relative power remind you of your worth right before you walk into a room full of people who might forget it? I met Luca again a week later, this time not as a waitress, but as something else. We'd arranged to meet at a cafe, not the hotel, neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe, private enough for serious talk. He arrived with only one bodyguard this time, in a dark coat instead of a suit, projecting approachable billionaire instead of mob boss's son. "Miss Amara," he greeted, offering his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, not crushing. "You can call me Amara," I said. "I'm not used to miss." "Then we are even," he said, sitting. "I am not used to being called Luca in conversations this personal. Usually it's Mr. Vital or Sir or worse things." He smiled, trying to put me at ease. It almost worked. We talked logistics first. Always logistics. "We would like to invite you to Sicily," he said, "to San Leone, to see where your grandmother grew up, to meet some of our older relatives." He chose his words carefully. "This is not about dragging you into the business," he added quickly. "Papa, he has regrets. He wants to set something right before he's gone." "What does set something right look like?" I asked. My mother's warning rang in my ears. "He wants to feel better, not make it better." "Part of it is just acknowledgement," Luca said. "You exist. Your branch of the family exists. That matters to him. To me. Legally, he is revising his will to leave you something. Nothing that will ignite a war, I promise." He smiled wryly. "My brothers would string me up." "Something like property in Sicily?" he continued. "A house, land, perhaps a small percentage of the family holding company's dividends. Enough to create a connection, not enough to destabilize." The numbers he mentioned made my head spin. Even small percentage in his world was retire your mama comfortably in my world. I need to be clear about something, I said. I won't be anyone's secret. If I go out there, if I accept anything, it's not as your hidden black cousin you keep off the books. He nodded. Understood. Papa actually insisted we not hide this. He said, I hid her long enough. He hesitated. But I also need to be clear about optics. There are people in our world who will have feelings about this. You will hear things, some of them racist, some of them about class, some of them about gender. He spread his hands. I can't control all of that. I can only promise you I will stand on your side in it. Why? I asked. His eyebrows lifted. Because you are my family, he said simply. Because my father cares about you. Because my Nona taught us that blood is blood, even when it embarrasses you. Have you ever heard a white passing man with more power in his signature than you'll ever have in your paycheck say, my family, and felt both suspicious and moved? I didn't give him an answer that day. I told him I'd think about it, talk to my mother, pray on it, even if my prayers were half-formed and mostly me talking to Nana in my head. After a few more meetings, with lawyers, with Shauna, and with the reflection in the bathroom mirror, I agreed to one trip, one visit, one chance to see the place that had shaped Rosa before it spat her out. On my terms. No press, no social media, no scene where they paraded me in front of cameras to prove the Vitalis weren't racist because, look, they claimed their black cousin. I signed papers, non-disclosure agreements, clauses about not being liable for any of their old deals. Nowhere in there did it say, you must forgive an old man for ruining your grandmother's life. Legal documents can't make your heart do that work. On the plane, looking out over the Atlantic, I clutched my cheap little carry-on and my even cheaper notebook. Inside, I'd written lists, questions I wanted to ask, names I wanted to confirm, recipes I wanted to cross-check. It felt like overkill. It also felt like the only way to not drown in the largeness of what I was doing. You okay? Luca asked from the seat across the aisle. They'd flown me business class. I'd never been that far forward in a plane. The seat reclined into a bed. They served real silverware. It all felt fake, like someone would come yank me back to economy any second. I'll let you know when we land, I said. He chuckled. Fair. He didn't press. For that, I was grateful. Have you ever been stuck in a metal tube, hurtling through the sky, heading towards a past you weren't sure you wanted to claim, and found yourself humming your grandmother's songs just to keep from unraveling? When we landed in Palermo and then drove the hour and a half to San Leone, the landscape outside the window looked like pictures I'd seen in old books. Scrubby hills, bursts of green where vineyards clung to the earth, slate-gray sea on the horizon. The closer we got, the more my skin prickled. Every once in a while, I'd catch a road sign with a name Nana had mumbled in her sleep. Favara, Agrigento, San Leone. We are here, Luca said, as the car pulled into a narrow street flanked by low houses with peeling paint and tiny balconies. Kids chased a ball in the dust. Old women sat in doorways, watching, aprons still on for lunch. Looks like home, I muttered, surprising myself. Different language, same energy. The driver stopped in front of a faded yellow house with a green door, wrought iron gate, olive tree in the yard. It wasn't anything special, objectively, but when we stepped out, Salvatore was already there, sitting on a plastic chair in the shade like he'd been waiting since 1950. His eyes met mine. Whatever awkwardness we'd had in the hotel melted into something raw here. Questa è stata nostra casa, he said. This was our house. He gestured. Where your nonna was born, where she used to climb that tree even when Mama shouted her, where she kissed that American fool for the first time. He smiled, a sad little twist. I thought it was gone, he said. The house, the memories, the possibilities. But some things don't die so easy. They go underground, like roots. He pressed a key into my hand. "It is empty now," he said. "I bought it back when I started to make real money. I told myself it was for sentiment. I never did anything with it. Maybe I was waiting." He looked down at my hand. "For you." Have you ever had someone hand you the keys to a place your grandmother cried over in a cramped American apartment and felt the ground shift under your feet in a way no hotel promotion or degree ever managed? It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't the Vitale compound I'd seen in Googled pictures once I'd known the name to search. It was a small, worn, sun-baked house with cracks in the plaster and decades of ghosts. But it was ours. And for the first time since Nana died, I felt like I could point to a spot on a map and say with my whole chest, I come from there. Whether or not I chose to stay tied to the people who gave it to me, that was a decision for another day. The yellow house in San Leon's Key sat heavy in my palm after we got back to the States. I'd put it on my nightstand, right next to my alarm clock and the jar I kept my tips in. Sometimes I'd wake up in the dark, reach over, and run my fingers along its jagged edge just to make sure it was real. A part of me still expected to open my eyes and find myself back in our old apartment on the west side. Nana in the kitchen, cussing at the TV, no rich Italians in sight. Have you ever gotten something you always secretly wanted and then been too scared to look at it straight on in case it vanished? I needed a minute. Sicily had taken more out of me than the jet lag. Standing in that village, hearing kids shout "Amari" like they'd known me forever, watching old women squint at me and mutter, "She got Rosa's eyes," had been a lot. Sitting at a long Sunday table with Salvatore's siblings and cousins, watching them size me up between bites of pasta, trying to decide if I was an answer to a prayer or the punchline to a joke, had been even more. And then there were the not cousins, the ones who answered to cugino or zio, but really were business associates, the ones whose questions weren't about how was Nana in America, but so, what are your plans now that you know? Plans. They meant, now that you know you're technically of Vitale, what are you going to try to take? Inheritance, boards, votes, pieces of a pie they'd been slicing amongst themselves for decades. They hid it behind smiles. "If you ever want to relocate," one said, swirling his wine, "there is opportunity here. Our family looks after its own." Another, more blunt after his third grappa, muttered, "Let's just hope the will doesn't get too creative." Luca picked up on all of it. He caught my eye across crowded rooms more than once, as if to say, "I see them. I'm trying." When we got back, he called me into his office downtown, not as a waitress, not as a charity case, but as someone whose life his signature on a piece of paper could change irrevocably. "We need to talk about expectations," he said, gesturing for me to sit. His office looked like something out of a movie. Floor-to-ceiling furniture, massive abstract painting I was afraid to even breathe near. "Yours and everyone else's," he said. "Yours and everyone else's." "Mine are pretty simple," I said. "I don't want anyone coming after what's already mine. My life, my job, that house in San Leone, whatever small thing your father decides to leave me. And I also don't want to be dragged into whatever this is when you all start fighting about the real money after he's gone." He winced at the real money, didn't deny it though. "And theirs?" I added, raising an eyebrow. "Theirs are complicated," he said. "Some of them are genuinely curious. They want to meet you to fill in gaps. Others see you as a threat, even with Papa's assurances that your share is symbolic. Old habits die hard." "You mean racism," I said flatly. "I mean racism, classism, and a deep fear of anyone new at the table," he agreed. "But yes, racism. Have you ever been relieved and exhausted at the same time when someone refuses to dance around the ugly word and just says it?" Papa is rewriting his will, Luca went on. You know about the house, the grove, the stipend. That last word still made me want to laugh. The amount he'd mentioned as modest would have wiped out all of my mother's debt and funded night school for me twice over. He also wants to put something in place for you here in the company. I stiffened. No, I said automatically. I didn't go to business school. I'm not trying to roll up to shareholder meetings as some diversity mascot. He held up a hand. It's not a board seat, he said quickly. He's not completely mad. It's more like a scholarship fund in your name for girls like you. Black girls, immigrant girls, first-gen college students, people who carry two worlds in their tongue like you do. He slid a folder across the desk. There it was, in black and white. The Rosa Conti Fund. Beneath it, a mission statement that sounded suspiciously like something Shauna from HR might have written if she had been asked. Equity, opportunity, language as legacy, all the right buzzwords. My name at the bottom as Program Director, Consultant. You want to pay me to help your family give money to people like my friends, my cousins, my past self, he said. Yes, because we should have been doing it already, because Papa feels he owes something, and frankly, this helps us as much as it helps them. How? I asked. Reputation? Market access? Sleeping at night? Take your pick. He didn't pretend otherwise, and I respected that. Have you ever had someone admit their altruism has selfish roots and found it easier to trust than the ones who swear they're doing it purely out of the goodness of their hearts? Still, I hesitated. I understand what this looks like from my side, right? I said, your father abandons a black sister, she builds a life anyway, her grandmother grows up cleaning after rich people in your hotels, then you swoop in with a charitable fund in her name and a set of keys and say, see, we're making it right. I met his eyes. That doesn't erase what happened. Not for me, not for my mother. Money doesn't erase. It just changes context. He nodded slowly. I know. And if at any point this feels like we are using you more than helping you use what's yours, I expect you to walk away, loudly if you have to. A corner of my mouth twitched. You sure? I'd rather be publicly called to account than privately sit in my father's mistakes, he said. We can handle bad press. We've survived worse. Have you ever been offered power in a room that once only saw you as service staff and realized the real scary part isn't that they might take it back, it's that you might actually use it? I took the job, slowly, cautiously, on a contract that my own lawyer, courtesy of a connection through Alma's church friend, reviewed with a fine-tooth comb. I worked my regular shifts at the hotel, and on my off days sat in smaller conference rooms with Luca's CSL team, arguing about selection criteria and outreach. We're not just going to slap Rosa Conti on a pamphlet and hand out internships to your nephew's friends, I told him. We're going into schools in places like where I grew up. We're talking to counselors who know which kids are carrying the most weight. We're funding therapy as much as tuition. He listened. Not always easily, not always without pushback from his more conservative lieutenants, but he listened. In the family, things were rockier. Some of the older aunties embraced me, hugged me, called me Beda Mia, and pushed extra meatballs onto my plate when I came to Sicily again for the eventual funeral. It was a sin what they did to Rosa, one great aunt whispered in my ear, breath smelling like a niece. At least now her blood is back where it belongs. Others barely concealed their disdain, whispered figlia di un soldato, daughter of the soldier, said it like bastard. Asked rude questions. So, your father, he was... They'd let the sentence hang, expecting me to fill in black like a confession. I learned to stare back and say, he was a man my grandmother loved. That's all you need to know. Have you ever discovered that some people will always see you as a liability in their story, and that your job isn't to fix their script, just to stop auditioning for it? On my side of the ocean, the reactions were equally mixed. My mother refused to set foot in the yellow house when I sent her pictures. I'm not flying across the ocean so some Sicilian ghost of your great-grandfather watch me pee, she texted, half joke, half resentment. You want to go, go. Take Zoe when you're ready. I'm good. My friends were more curious. Girl, you got a villa? Lila crooned, zooming in on my phone screen. We're doing a board retreat there. I don't care if we have to sleep on mats. I said, it's not a villa. It's a glorified cottage with plumbing from the 60s. A cottage in Sicily is still Sicily, she shot back. Don't play. Despite her reluctance, my mother did soften around one thing. She started letting herself talk about Rosa's early years. She used to talk about that olive tree, she admitted one evening, eyes far away. She said she used to climb it and look out at the water and feel like the world was bigger than that street. That's why she left. The man just gave her a boat. Her mouth twisted. He took a lot more than he gave, but she made what she could out of it. So will I said quietly. And I did. Not by moving into the yellow house full-time and playing Mediterranean princess, but by using it as a place to breathe, to remember, to bring a piece of my Chicago life into a village that once spat my grandmother out and now grudgingly claimed her descendant. I spent one summer there helping run a language camp for kids from the neighborhood. Black Italian kids, North African immigrant kids, kids whose grandparents still muttered slurs, but whose mouths were busy learning 3 languages at once. We cooked both ways, pasta and greens, cannoli and peach cobbler. I told them stories about Rosa, not as a cautionary tale, but as a bridge. She spoke like you, a little girl said, tugging on my sleeve. Half this, half that. I replied, she spoke like herself. We just take after her. Have you ever felt your own fractured identity knit together a little when you pass it on purposely instead of by accident? Back at the hotel, my role shifted too. I didn't quit right away. There was something grounding about still showing up. Where I'd once been invisible, now knowing I had a set of keys in my pocket that said I belonged in more places than just the service entrance. I trained new staff. I made sure the younger black waiters knew their rights, knew HR's name, knew that when a drunk executive tried something slick, they didn't have to just smile and take it. I pushed for harassment training that actually included scenarios like, what if the guest is your boss's boss and he's also on a Forbes list? I didn't tell everyone my full story, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want to become it. I was still Amara the shy waitress, Amara the girl whose grandma cursed at the TV in Dialect, Amara, the woman figuring out how to carry both without letting either be turned into someone else's redemption arc. Have you ever realized that the real happy ending isn't being whisked out of your life into someone else's, it's having enough leverage to decide which parts of each world you keep? The last time I saw Salvatore, he was back in Sicily, thinner, skin like parchment. We sat in the yellow house, which now had my throw blanket on the couch and my notebook on the table. He asked me in dialect to recite the greeting again, the one that had started all this. Benvetu don, lume core visicina donore. He closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I wish, he said slowly, I had heard that from your grandmother's mouth one more time before she died. You heard it from mine, I said. It's not the same, but it's something. He nodded, eyes still closed. I was a coward, he repeated, as he had the first night. But I am glad I was given one more chance to be less so. He left me the house officially, in his will, the grove, the fund, enough to make sure I never had to pick up a double shift just to make rent again, even if I chose to. Not enough to make me the center of any cousin's greed. His sons fought, of course, mostly about other things, but my name came up in those arguments, I'm sure. Not my business. My seat at the table was on my terms now, at the edge, on Zoom, talking about scholarships and hiring practices, not about shipments and family obligations. If they ever tried to drag me deeper, I had my own lawyers, my own board, my own backbone to say no. Have you ever come from people who ran from certain rooms and found yourself walking back into them with your head high, not because you forgot why they ran, but because you remembered and chose differently? So yes, the shy black waitress greeted the billionaire CEO's Sicilian dad in a dialect that left the room frozen, because only one family spoke like that. Because a man who'd built an empire on top of a void heard his mother's kitchen in my voice and had to face the daughter of the sister he'd left behind. Because a grandmother who crossed an ocean with nothing but a language and a broken heart planted words in my mouth that were seeds, not shackles. I didn't become a Vitale princess. I didn't marry into the money. I still take the train. I still clock in. Shauna still jokes, "Are you going to quit on us one day and go be a full-time mafia cousin?" And I still laugh and say, "Not unless y'all stop matching my 401k. But I walk into those rich rooms differently now. I don't hunch. I don't swallow my tongue. I know exactly whose blood and whose words I carry. And if, from time to time, an older Italian guest hears me mutter to myself in dialect when I drop a fork and does a double take, I just raise an eyebrow and say, "Long story." Because it is. A long story of men's cowardice and women's resilience, of race and class and boats and bad decisions. This is just the part where the quiet girl who thought she came from nowhere opened her mouth and found out her voice could summon ghosts, and in the process, send at least one of them to his grave a little less haunted. 3 years later, I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night with Sicilian on my tongue and the smell of garlic and collards, and I don't know if I'm in my grandmother's kitchen, the yellow house in San Leone, or the staff break room at the hotel. Have you ever lived enough lives that your memories stack up on top of each other like transparencies, and it takes a beat to figure out which one you're standing in now? These days, when I open my eyes, it's usually to the sight of a small dining room I can finally call my own. Instead of somebody else's ballroom, I've got 12 mismatched tables, walls the color of warm cream, and a sign over the door that reads Casa Rosa, my grandmother's name, in cursive that loops like her handwriting used to. By day, it's a cafe. By night, it's a supper club. On the menu, shrimp and grits with saffron broth, oxtail ragu over hand-rolled tagliata, cannoli with sweet potato filling. Half of it would make a Nona in Palermo clutch her pearls. The other half would make an auntie in Bronzeville purse her lips. Together, it tastes like home. The Rosa Conti Fund sits quietly in the background, feeding scholarships into the bones of this place. Business students from the West Side learning inventory and marketing in my cramped back office. High school girls with box braids and notebooks, practicing food cost math while I showed them how to make a roux. A kid from Little Village, half Mexican, half Italian, whose grandma cries when he comes home talking about how he heard his village accent spoken with a black woman's mouth and it didn't sound wrong. My name is on the lease. My mom's name is on the deed to the little house we bought together with part of the money from Sicily. Nana's name is on a brass plaque by the register, in honor of Rosa Conti, who survived more than anyone knows. Vitales still exist somewhere out there, shuffling assets, merging companies, arguing on nonsensical things like yacht sizes. Luca sends emails now and then with updates on the fund. 2 of this year's fellows interned in our Milan office. They ask for you. Once a year, I go back to the Yellow House for a week, sweep the dust off the floors, let the cousins I like come over for coffee. I stand under the olive tree Rosa used to climb and say, "We're okay." I'm still shy in some ways. I still trip over words when too many eyes land on me at once. When food writers come in and want to do interviews, I have to psych myself up. I still feel weird when someone with a blue check mark on Instagram calls me a symbol. A symbol of what? That black girls from broken lines can still inherit something other than trauma? That a waitress can walk into a room built for men and money and shift its temperature with one well-placed phrase? That language is a kind of DNA you can't file away in a courthouse, but it still binds and summons and indicts. I'm just Amara. I burn bread sometimes. I snap at my staff when I'm tired. I cry in the walk-in cooler when a customer reminds me too much of the men who used to talk over me and now talk about me like I'm not in the room. But I also know things now I didn't before. Know how to read a contract and ask, what does this clause mean for me, not just for you? Know that being invited into a powerful family doesn't mean you have to let them build a throne out of your gratitude. Know that saying no is not ingratitude, it's oxygen. A few months ago, a group of tourists came into Casa Rumsa. Loud, sunburnt, tipsy. One of them squinted at the menu. You know, this says arancine, not arancini, he scoffed. That's wrong in Italian. It's Sicilian, he said, Sicilian like he knew. It's not wrong in Sicilian, I replied calmly, clearing plates, and it's definitely not wrong in my grandmother's house. He laughed awkwardly. Oh, you speak Italian? Something like it, I said. He asked the usual follow-ups. Been to Italy? Got family there? I answered the ones I felt like answering and ignored the rest. When they left, one of my regulars, an older black man who used to sit at the counter at the diner where I worked before the hotel, shook his head. Folks always want to tell you who you are, he said. They can try. Doesn't mean I have to listen. Have you ever realized the biggest difference between then you and now you isn't the size of your bank account, but the volume of other people's opinions in your head? I used to whisper Nana's dialect in my apartment like it was a spell I wasn't allowed to cast too loud. Now I stand in my own kitchen and shout it over the sizzle of onions. Ama, asaja, I called to Zoe when she's in the front doing her homework. She rolls her eyes in the way only 16-year-olds can. Ma, nobody talks like that, she says, grinning. You sound like you're about to join a mafia movie. Only one family spoke like this, I reminded her, mimicking Don Salvatore's gravelly tone, and we are it, baby. She sticks her tongue out, grabs a spoon, and tastes the sauce. Needs more salt, she declares, in English. Traditrice, I mutter. Traitor. We laugh. I'm teaching her both now. How to fry chicken, and how to make caponata, how to heart-check a man who claims to love you, and how to handle a salary, and how to greet her elders in a dialect almost nobody in America expects to hear anymore from a black girl, and how to handle the look on their faces when she does. Because that's the real legacy I got the night the shy black waitress forgot to be invisible and greeted the billionaire Sicilian dad like he was sitting at Rosa's tiny kitchen table instead of the head of a glass and marble empire. I didn't get crowned, not with jewels anyway. I got something better. I got my grandmother's name said out loud in a room that had once pretended she didn't exist. I got a key to a house she dreamed about from across an ocean. I got the chance to use money tainted by cowardice to fund courage in kids who know what it is to feel like they come from nowhere. And I got the very unshy knowledge that my voice, quiet, accented, inconvenient, can make powerful men stop mid-sentence and reckon with what they'd buried. Have you ever thought your job was to balance glasses on a tray and discovered, by accident, that you'd been carrying something far more breakable and valuable on your tongue all along? I still bust tables, I still wipe spills, I still flinch a little when someone snaps their fingers, then remind myself, you're the owner now. Nobody snaps at you. But when I catch myself in the window of the restaurant at night, apron askew, hair tucked up, shadows of my staff moving behind me, I sometimes see more than my own reflection. I see Rosa, younger than I ever knew her, sun on her face in front of that yellow house. I see Salvatore as a boy, too proud to hold his sister's hand. I see a long line of women, African, Sicilian, Southern, Northern, whose tongues were policed and mocked and dismissed. And I see one more woman, me, who took all those words, put them in the right order at the wrong time in front of the right man, and watched an entire family freeze, then thaw. So if you ever hear a waiter or waitress slip into a language that doesn't match what you think they should sound like, maybe don't laugh. Maybe ask yourself what histories you're eavesdropping on when you were only supposed to get your drink order. Because behind every buonasera and how y'all doing and welcome, sir, there might be a whole continent of stories dying to be told. And sometimes all it takes is one brave slip of the tongue to let them out.